Hello, we're about to start our next session, and I would like to very much welcome Joerg Blumtritt, and he's going to present on the behavioral analytics with smartphone data. Welcome, Joerg, please.
Yeah, thanks for having me here. Actually, I mean, it was incredible 2 days already, so I'm completely moved by what I've seen. It's really the one place to be as a data scientist. And what happened is I crashed actually my Debian system, and tried to reinstall it over the part of the last 15 minutes or so. I wasn't able, so this is the default Windows 7. I haven't used in 3 years or so. Hopefully it works. Well, yeah, telling people's lives, actually, the behavior from smartphone data. This is a topic that has been touched already in this track several times, and I hope I can add some details to what the other speakers already brought up. It's really, I mean, if data science is the most interesting thing that happened in my professional life, I think in all the time I had been working, even more impressive is the development of mobile. So we've crossed 2 billion smartphone users already. So it's 2 billion people on this earth accessing the internet via their mobile phones. That's an incredible number. I mean, 2 billion people, 40 years ago, there was hardly more than 2 billion people at all. So we are expecting that more or less the total adult population of this planet will very soon be connected via their mobile to the internet. And no one really has expected these numbers to grow so fast. And the market is far from stable. For example, if I have my smartphone here, this looks a bit like an iPhone 6. Actually, it is not. It's by a Chinese manufacturer called Xiaomi. Xiaomi is a company, is 5 years old and is now number 3 worldwide as a manufacturer and number 1 in China already. So no predictions what will happen in this market are really stable. No one really can say what's next. It is often that people refer to the smartphone as a mobile computer. And that is far wrong. Of course, I can do computing things. People say, well, it has more computing power than a laptop would have 25 years ago, or something like that. But actually, the smartphone is a computer, but it is far more than that. And to demonstrate that, I've on this Samsung Galaxy phone, I've installed the Google Glass operation system, just to show you that we are only speaking about form factors when we address different devices now. Is it a Google Glass? Is it as a mobile phone? Is it a tablet? And we will see these kinds of devices becoming more ubiquitous every day. And what is different from a mobile phone from a classic computer is this. The mobile phone is a platform that carries more than 20 sensors that permanently, continuously track data about us moving around, behaving, and also about the environment that surrounds us. I can show you this. I stripped down. This is actually a small tablet. It's a Google Nexus 7. Took out the circuit board to show you where this physically occurs. I mean, we try to see that as a black box, and this track is about transparency. One thing to make things transparent is just to show how they look like. So we have different kinds of sensors. For example, electromechanical sensors like the gyroscope. All kinds of accelerations are measured to describe our movements. So we have passive antenna, like the GPS receiver. So satellite information comes in. This is really important because my company is partly funded by a generous grant from the European Space Agency because we use satellite data. And then there is, well, the original functionality of a phone. You might say this is the bidirectional radio, which is not only the 4G or whatever frequency you use to actually convey voice, but it's also other forms of radio, like near-field communication, or Wi-Fi, or Bluetooth, and many more, like the battery. There's a battery is tracking how the battery is charging or draining, and lots of other sensors, like the microphone. Okay, we don't see this as a sensor. Usually, the microphone is something we use to use the phone to call people, but actually, the microphone in a smartphone is a sensor because it's always on, as is the camera, which continuously tracks the luminosity in your surroundings. You see that when you use your smartphone, and it automatically adopts the brightness. Yeah, and others, like some smartphones have air pressure measurements, temperature, or the compass, which is de facto a magnetic flux sensor. So, and how do we tap into that? It's not really an easy thing. I mean, yeah, of course, the phone tracks the data, but where do you find it actually? And so we didn't know that. We tried to find companies providing that when we started 3 years ago, and there was a nice approach by a team at MIT. A spin-off of that would become a company called Behavio. They had a sensor framework called FUMF. We tried that out. It didn't work. Why did it work with Android phones in the US? Why didn't it work in Europe, or even worse, in Asia? The answer is quite straightforward. They use the Google Services Framework, which is a built-in functionality of original Google Android versions. But if you use other Android distributions, like open Android distributions, Cyanogen or whatever, they don't provide these services. So you can't access the data easily. It is there, but you can't get into that. And so we programmed an app. So this is basically our app Explore. That's more so a quantified self thing. I come back why we think that people might voluntarily download and track themselves. But actually, this is not really why we built it. We built it to describe what people are doing. I was in market research and social research for 20 years or so, doing mostly advertising research, did lots of targeting things, cross-device tracking from Mediacom, for example, a Group M media agency. And it's an interesting thing about this advertising data that we have heard of in the last talk. Advertising tracking data can be used to display you an ad which has a higher probability to get clicked on. You could also use as a description of what people do online. So this is a really interesting social science approach in targeting data. You really see what people are searching for, and that tells. I mean, Google uses this, for example, very notorious is the Google flu trends, where they make predictions on the spread of infectious diseases and the like. So you can use targeting data or advertising data as a collection of empirical social data. But you are losing people as soon as they stop surfing in the web. So this is a shortcoming, and I found that very unsatisfactory. So we built a model to fill that gap with the mobile data, because you usually carry your phone around 24 hours a day, more or less. It's always near you. You can really follow people. And I want to guide you through this approach by using this model. That's it's a nice paper, Finnish group of geodetics that published that. So you have a layered model, how the data looks and what you could do with that. So starting with the raw data that's collected mostly at 50 hertz or so, 50 sample points per second. That means here's an example, for example, this is just tables with the latitude, longitude. So this is the GPS data, the geolocation data. Everyone knows that. Everyone uses Google Maps or tools like that. So But still, it's interesting because it's multidimensional. It's not only latitude, longitude. You have other readings there too, and the timestamp. So it's geospatial and temporal data. More complicated is with these three-dimensional data, like gyroscope. The gyroscope has 3 axes because you can move your phone around, and all axes are tracked in the coordinate system towards the gravity, which is also an acceleration. Yeah, you can't really tell many things from that, but you immediately recognize one thing: there's artifacts. You wouldn't be able to change your acceleration with these peaks. Certainly, these are artifacts in the hardware. And these are very telling. I mean, every phone has its very unique signature in these artifacts. So if you know that a phone with these kinds of artifacts were at a certain point, you can identify this phone afterwards if you find it somewhere else. This is already an interesting privacy intrusion, or you can be used as one, and it is used, as was revealed. It is used, for example, by intelligence services to identify phone users. So even if this is not telling anything about the behavior, it's a privacy thing. So this is first abstraction. So we normalized the gyroscopic data and then tried to episodic description and someone moving around. This is a colleague of mine. She's standing up from her desk, walking into the kitchen, obviously turning sharply, then I think laying down the phone on the kitchen table while waiting the water to boil in the kettle. Then she infuses her tea, turns again, leaves the kitchen, and sits or still or has the phone at her desk again. So this is 15 minutes. This is already very near to what would be a behavioral description, but you don't see this in the data. It's still just a curve, could be anything. So the task here is to define what we see as an event from this data. An event is a construct. Obviously, there is no such event as a step. It's something that is a convention. We say, I'm doing a step, and now I'm jumping, but it's arbitrary how to differentiate these. So, and what we do is we try to identify certain thresholds, certain models using machine learning for that, and then we have a tool to tell our app on the smartphone of people what events we find interesting. For example, entering in a circumference of a retailer store, and then triggering some interaction. I will come to that. Like here, we could add several location triggers. Here, for example, this is a restaurant near us, and whenever we enter this restaurant, we get reminded to do something. So this is events, and now we have to bring these events into a kind of storyline to tell how these events are connected. And with geolocation, this is quite easy. You see me flying to Düsseldorf and then taking the S-Bahn and tram to the city. Or here, me moving around in Cologne. Indoor is tricky because usually you don't have good readings indoors, so you have to find other ways. I come to this later. So this is the simple context, but it doesn't tell you really what I did. What we need is to find out what people really were doing or how they were feeling and things like that. This is the rich context. And for this, we use classic questionnaire surveys. This is our app in a real case. We, for example, have a sample. This is a small group of Chinese tourists that we ask in China to participate as a market research when they come to Europe to walk around with our app installed on their phones. They all have Android phones, so it's not a problem that we have this Chinese version not for iOS. And when we see with the data, this Chinese person, for example, was entering a department store, we could, in the evening, ask them What did you buy? Were you satisfied with the service? Did it meet your expectations? And learn by that and try to find models. So this is the rich context. This is an interesting market research, very classic market research. Another application that we are building, this is still in alpha version, is a timeline approach. Having a kind of dashboard that you can share with others that would, for example, tell the story of your driving. Here, my colleagues driving from Frankfurt back to Munich and getting into a traffic jam. So the bubble size is speed, and the bubble color is elevation. So you see crossing the Schwäbische Alb, which is a small mountain range in southern Germany, and then automatically generate interpretation of what happens. And I mean, this is I wouldn't bore you with what's possible with data, because you already know that. The interesting thing is, how do you make data accessible to people so they understand what you are doing? How do we tell people what's possible with the data? How do you enhance people's relation to the data? And one thing that we try out is to show a kind of abstraction, a timeliney abstraction. To use a social media-like approach, but with the content of the social medium automatically generated from the phone's readings. You could also include here the diagnostic data that the car itself produces, but we found out that this doesn't really add anything. Most things that the so-called OBD bus tracks, you can easily track with the phone without tapping into the car. So good approach to have, I mean, the phone as a black box, for example, to support discounts with insurers. Yeah, the battery. No geos data now, it's the battery data. You see, this is the battery data of my own phone over the course of 1 week. You see I drain my battery quite regularly up to nearly empty, but then manage to reload it. This is a very telling pattern. You clearly see when I'm at home. You clearly see which devices or which behavior tends to empty my battery more, and the like. So even if you think that you wouldn't be trackable because you deactivated the location service in your settings in the phone, the battery is still telling enough. Or even more abstract, if you take the magnetic flux. So this is the magnetic flux, again, of me. You see very sharp readings. I'm not really sure what causes that, but it's always occurring when I enter a train. And then you have a very, very specific pattern that shows where I'm living. So this is a signature that we can derive from the phones that can identify the place, the whereabouts. And also a very interesting thing is when you enter a store and there's a shoplifting prevention barrier, this is a very characteristic magnetic reading. So we could use that for triggering events with our event processing engine, saying whenever a person entered and left a shop, ask the person what she did there. So, or combine that with other readings. You wouldn't take magnetic readings usually as a conspicuous thing. You would think it's completely innocent to track your magnetic readings. I mean, most people don't realize that it is magnetic readings. You think it's a compass. But of course it's not. The compass is just a visualization that you take from this data. Again, it's three-dimensional data with all three axes. The phone also tracks all radio activity. In that case, it's the Wi-Fis. So we move around many Wi-Fis, and they all continuously get tracked. And we can use that to tell where people were. You can see the size of a building, you can see how many parties live there, you can immediately identify professional Wi-Fis from private Wi-Fis, you can see what hardware people use. For example, here You see clearly this is someone, me actually, owning a HP printer. You can use Wi-Fi data to localize people indoors, and it's very powerful. For example, to localize people when moving around inside airports, we usually use the Wi-Fi readings because every shop in the airports have their own Wi-Fi, and they all have a very characteristic. They have an identifier. This is not only how the Wi-Fi is called. This is what you usually see. They have a so-called BSSID, which is a unique identifier for that Wi-Fi. So you don't need fancy stuff like beacons to do that. You can do that with down-to-the-earth technology that's ubiquitous. And another thing that gets completely lost in the discussion of privacy and information self-determination is, I mean, you might decide that you don't want to be tracked. You can't avoid that others unintentionally track you. Other tracking is the, I would say, evil twin of self-tracking. If people, for example, make selfies, usually you see other people in the background. We are used to that. We know that that happens. In most countries, in Europe at least, you have the so-called panoramic freedom, so that you are always free outside of buildings to take images, no matter if there's people on that image which didn't consent into being photographed. So, but you usually don't think about other trackings in terms of the data people emit, like the Wi-Fi signature, like proximity readings that you get out of the Bluetooth readings. And the other tracking is really hard to get into. People understand what happened and also to find a meaningful way to regulate that or so. I think it's hardly possible. So what we do is we try to educate people so that they could see which sensors can be tracked and can be switched on and off. I mean, that's from the privacy point of view, it's as I said, even if you turn many of these sensors off, it's still telling. So you can't really escape to be tracked. And this is just starting. We have an API, so it's around 1,000 people at this moment carrying our app around. Some of them are incentivized, some just want to collect the data, and we make this data accessible via an API. So you can have a web API and you can access your own data and an aggregate of all the other people. Of course, this is not really a remedy, but I think people can learn, and we hope other people build things on our API, how that works. So how data looks like. You can find applications that tell. So it's, I strongly believe that the talk about there is no privacy because 4 sample points in geolocation data is sufficient to identify 95% of the population. So you really can't escape. So what do we do with that? We have to find a way to tell people what happened and to bring meaning in that data thing. Otherwise, I mean, this is exactly the problem in the targeting and advertising industry, that people really have the feeling that they missed something, that there is something happening that they can't control. Of course there is. We can't control the data, but as you correctly said, this is not a problem in most fields of our life. Somehow this is more spooky because it's very personal data. And if we don't manage to bring people on our side, we really lose things. For example, one project that we are in is dealing with chronically ill. So there is, for example, people who have been diagnosed with osteoporosis. It's the degeneration of the bone mass. So your bones become less massive and can break easily. And you can avoid these symptoms to occur if you maintain your mobility long enough. If you have a good if you have good condition, good muscles, your bones won't break even if they become very thin. And second is you have to drink sufficiently, and there's behavioral things. And with an app like that, you can help people to maintain to their daily routine, like remembering drinking things, like remembering not taking the elevator but using the stairs. That sounds ridiculous. I mean, you don't get people to lose weight but by just giving them scales for their bathroom. We all know that. It would be a cruel thing, but you can help people to track themselves and increase their well-being by that. And on the other hand, collect interesting data about the ongoings of this disease on an individual level without the need of always aggregating or just having a very small sample. So it's really rich data. It's the richest data actually that I know of that would describe people's behavior. And it would be very, very sad for all of us if we would see further restrictions in to use the data. But to avoid that, we have to help people to understand it. We have to help our legislative bodies to find good regulations and to prevent evil things in the society to happen. You know, I mean, in most of the free societies that we usually come from when we are in conferences like that, it's not such a big thing if you get tracked. It is, of course, a very severe thing if you get tracked in countries that are not that free. I mean, so it's not about privacy here, it's about preventing evil things to be done with the data. Because the privacy thing is already done. I would say we are helpless. We can't build privacy compliant mobiles, otherwise we would lose the functionality of the mobile from the beginning, and we don't want that, obviously. So, well, yeah, use our API, try out our app. I mean, we are just beginning doing things that, and as far as I see the field, there's not many companies really concentrating in using mobile data to that extent. It's like a very small community still. I think we will see more of that. I hope we see more of that. Hopefully for the next Strata, there will be many talks, maybe in mobile data track even. Yeah, would really like to hear your thoughts about that. Thank you.
All right, we can take some questions.
Judith said that we are always tracked and that there's no possibility that we can escape. Well, maybe 70% of the time is my iPhone lying at home on the table. So it thinks I am at home, but I'm not. What you can, and in that time, obviously, you have no data of me. You don't know what I do. What do you do with that, with the missing patterns?
Yeah. I mean, you can't avoid that. Of course, there's always data missing. There's always situations where you can't see what people are doing. This is not unknown. In social sciences, this is always the case. I mean, I was once responsible for one of the large surveys that is done with 10,000 interviews on the consumption behavior. You might know some of these studies like TGI, for example. So it was a German version of TGI, actually. And of 100 people that were addressed with our interviewers, 60 would decline to answer the question. So it's a very common thing that we miss data. Of course, this is, and it's not random. It's of course it's always the better educated, the younger, or so they would rather not answer to questionnaires, and this problem is even worse in classic social science, I would say. Nevertheless, I would say that the iPhone lying at home most of the time is rather the exception. Most people carry their phones with them. Most people already carry their phone with them all the time, and we will see that become even more true when, for example, mobile payment and other uses come and enrich the usability of the phones further. So we will see, I mean, there's cities where you pay your parking lot with mobile, many cities already. I usually buy my train tickets mobile, so many people do. I have my boarding pass mobile, of course, and so it becomes natural that you don't leave your phone. And so I think this on the one hand, it's a common thing in social science. We always have that. On the other hand, it's far less a thing compared to classic survey-based research.
And then I have another question.
Yeah.
What is the business case? I mean,
yeah.
You have a great data. You do obviously great analysis. But you know, I'm a data scientist myself, and I do a lot of analysis, and then I'm asking myself, so what?
Yeah, I can tell you, or I've mentioned 3 business cases in my talk. First would be classic social research, getting to know what people buy, for example, offline. I mean, we have this so-called customer journey to great extent online. Usually we don't see what people do offline. And it's really interesting, this search offline, purchase online, or the other way around. You see something on the web and buy it offline. You can't track that really, and that's a very sound business case, actually, I can tell you. Second is supporting people to maintain their health, which is kind of a business case. I mean, it's more like app development, actually. So we use the technology to enhance apps. So this is a business case in itself. So it's like a SDK, a software development kit that we provide to make apps better, more interactive, more interacting with what we really do. And the third is the automotive case for car drivers. There is the insurance business case, but it's also the car manufacturers that are looking to bring meaningful interpretation into the connected car business. I mean, what does connected car mean? What does a self-driving car mean? I mean, a self-driving car that does not know what you want is meaningless. The car, you need to understand, for example, the transition points when people leave their car, when people change into another means of transportation. So this is making the car data, bringing that into richer context. And so these are at this moment, my 3 business cases. Sorry.
Great presentation. Going back on your question, is that behavior data, if I assume? So it's like, you know, if for some reason I'm a very active person and I left my phone, and my phone is like for the entire morning at home,
yeah.
If the system could work, people will call me and asking me like if I'm sick.
Absolutely.
So this could alert my friends that, you know, she spent, you know, it's like 4 p.m., her device didn't move. Can someone call her and see she's okay? And it's like, you know,
exactly.
There's more a reflection on that.
There's applications already with that. So there's many people working in that direction already. So emergency calls for elderly people, for example, that are automatically triggered and the like. Yes.
Yeah. And the connected car, Telefonica did a project here on that for, like, you know, if you give the entire data of your phone, you get a discount on the.
Yes, and I think that makes sense. I mean, it's somehow a deal. Fortunately enough, European laws provide health and life insurance companies from using this data to discriminate people. For example, the European Court of Justice dismissed the practice in Germany to discriminate men and women with different tariffs for life insurances. So this is a very good thing in Europe, I would say. But there's nothing like that for car insurances, and there should not be. Obviously, it's a good thing to prevent people from driving badly. You don't have a natural right to speed. I mean, I don't like the idea of being tracked while driving a car, but on the other hand, I mean, so what?
I do have a question, more like on the sense that when you did the stores and more like on the shopping marketing, that what do you use on that time? Was like Wi-Fi or was cameras?
It's different things. When people moved around in the airport, we knew all the Wi-Fi identifiers in that airport. It was Frankfurt Airport, by the way. I can tell. The client knows that I can tell. So, so we have all the Wi-Fi's in Frankfurt Airport, and so we can see where people were moving around inside. Outside the airport, we just use an approximate whereabout, like being in a major shopping area. And then we would ask people, did you buy something? Or so we don't look into that detail that we have a single point of interest, like a special store. We did that for a sports retailer, actually. We had a sample of this sports retailer's clients that, of course, voluntarily installed the app. They were incentivized to do so. And then we could ask when they went to a competition, what did you do there? Was there something on discount, on sale, or something like that? So why would you not buy that at my store but go to the competition? And that was really done with defining single points of interest.
Do we have any more questions?
It's not a question, it's another case of how we can use this, and concretely for help the depressive persons that they never, sometimes they don't realize that they are enter into depression or that they are entered into a maniac phase. There is already an existing application for control these persons that automatically sends a message to the psychiatric to inform the doctor that a change in the pattern of the behavior of this patient is changing. So instead of waiting the 2-3 weeks for the next visit with the doctor can advance and change the medication. And so usually, this is a case that already is working.
Absolutely, and I sadly have lost people due to bipolar disorder, and it's always people. You can't remember how you felt 6 months ago. You just remember how you felt yesterday. So these slight changes, very slow changes in your mood get unnoticed. And you can't obviously visit your physician or your psychiatrist every week or so. That would not be feasible. Another good use case is, I know of a researcher from Sweden, Sarah Rigge. She is suffering from Parkinson's disease, and she works in the field of using apps to help people with Parkinson's disease to maintain their mobility. And this is also done by measuring the tremor, for example. If you have that kind of Parkinson's disease that causes a tremor, it's a classic 8 to 10 hertz tremor. You hold your smartphone, and the smartphone detects your condition and then suggests the change in medication. So you don't need to see your neurologist every week or so. So there's many very benign uses for that, and this is really why I think we should see that we keep the data usable and have more data actually, and find a good way in dealing with these necessary privacy intrusions that already occur all the time.
Fabulous. Thank you for your presentation.
Well, thanks for having me here.